Your dad signed you away." Those 5 words shattered everything I believed about my family. I was 16 years old, crying alone on my birthday when a stranger showed up at my door carrying legal documents that proved my father had given me up 3 months earlier in secret without ever saying goodbye. He had signed his name on the dotted line and removed me from his life as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience he could simply discard. But what my father didn't know was that by throwing me away, he had just handed me the keys to his entire empire. My name is Sierra Holloway. I'm 16 years old, and this is the story of how my worst birthday became the night I discovered who I truly was and what I was really worth. If you're watching this, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. I woke up at 7 in the morning on January 16th, 2025. The house was completely quiet. That was the first thing I noticed. There was no sound where there should have been sound. No clatter of dishes from the kitchen. No quiet conversation drifting up the stairs. No smell of coffee or bacon or anything that suggested life was happening beyond my bedroom door. I stayed there for a moment, staring at the ceiling and telling myself it was still early. People sleep in on weekends. Maybe they were planning something. Maybe when I went downstairs, there would be balloons and a cake, and my father would smile at me the way he smiled at Brendan and Meredith. Maybe this year would be different. I put on my robe and walked quietly down the hallway, past the closed doors of my siblings' empty rooms, then down the curved staircase that cost more than most people's cars. The kitchen was spotless and cold. The marble countertops shone beneath the recessed lights, and the breakfast table was completely empty. Not a single place setting was there. That's when I noticed it. A yellow sticky note was attached to the refrigerator door. Meredith's messy handwriting covered it in black marker. "Stay out of sight, freak. We're at the Monarch celebrating Dad's deal. Don't embarrass us." I read it 3 times. I kept waiting for the joke to end, for someone to step out from behind the island and shout surprise, but the house remained silent. The note remained cruel, and I stood there barefoot on the cold tile floor, feeling something break inside my chest. I checked my phone. There were 0 messages from my family, but 1 text from an unknown number had arrived exactly at midnight. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." I didn't know anyone with those initials. Not yet. I walked through the hallway like a ghost inside my own house. The walls were covered with photographs, 47 frames to be exact. I'd counted them once during one of those long afternoons when everyone else was attending an event I hadn't been invited to. 47 moments of Hartwell family history preserved behind glass and placed in matching silver frames. I stopped in front of the Christmas photograph from 2023. My father was wearing his charcoal sweater, his arm around Victoria's shoulders. Brendan stood beside him, tall and polished, already practicing his future CEO smile. Meredith stood on the right, her red dress perfectly matching the decorations behind her. I wasn't in the photograph. I remembered that Christmas. Dad had sent me to Grandma Holloway's house 3 days before the holiday. "She's sick," he'd said. "She needs someone to take care of her." But when I arrived, Grandma was perfectly healthy and confused about why I was there. I moved to the next frame, Hawaii, 2022. The entire family stood together on the beach, with the sunset glowing behind them. I hadn't gone on that trip either. There weren't enough seats on the flight, Dad had explained, although I later found the booking confirmation showing 5 first-class tickets. The same pattern continued throughout the hallway. Thanksgiving dinners, birthday parties, graduation ceremonies. In 47 photographs, I appeared in exactly 3. And in every one, I had been pushed toward the edge of the frame, with half my body cropped out. I reached behind the bookcase at the end of the hallway, into the gap where I used to hide things as a child. My fingers touched the edge of a photograph I'd rescued from the trash years earlier. Mom was holding me as a baby. On the back was faded handwriting. Catherine and Sierra, 2009. Forever loved. They hadn't simply forgotten my birthday. They had spent 12 years removing me from this family's history. I called my father at 10 that morning. The phone rang twice before the call was rejected. It wasn't sent to voicemail. Rejected. He had seen my name on the screen and pressed the red button. I tried again. The same thing happened. My hands were shaking as I typed the message. "Dad, it's my birthday. Can we at least have dinner together tonight? The three dots appeared, then disappeared. They appeared again. 2 hours later, his reply came through. Busy. Victoria planned something at the club. Maybe next week. Maybe next week. I'd heard that phrase 47 times over the past year. I'd started counting after the 32nd time when I realized it was never going to mean anything. I called Brendan and reached voicemail. I called Meredith. She actually answered. What do you want? Her voice sounded muffled, as though she were holding the phone away from her face. It's my birthday. I know. I left you a note. You called me a freak. I'm getting my nails done for tonight. Can't talk. The call ended. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding my pillow against my chest, and stared out the window at the perfectly maintained lawn below. The gardeners had been there the day before, trimming the hedges into precise geometric shapes. The pool shimmered in the winter sunlight, covered for the season. The three-car garage held my father's Mercedes, Victoria's Range Rover, and Brendan's BMW. All gifts, all polished, all symbols of a family I had never truly belonged to. This house was worth $4.2 million. 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a home theater, a wine cellar, and I had never felt more alone in my life. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, EV again. I'll be there at 7 p.m. Don't open the door for anyone else. I pulled the memory box out from under my bed. It was an old shoebox, the cardboard soft and worn from years of being handled. Inside were the only things I had left of my mother. A silver bracelet engraved with SNC Forever, a dried rose from her funeral, a photograph of her laughing in a garden I didn't recognize, and a letter. The letter was the most valuable thing I owned. Mom had written it 3 weeks before she died, when cancer had already taken most of her strength, but not her spirit. Her handwriting was shaky, but determined. Every word was pressed deeply into the paper, as if she wanted to make them permanent. My darling Sierra, it began. If you're reading this, I'm no longer here to tell you in person, so let me say it now as many times as I can fit on this page. You are loved. You are worthy. You are the best thing I ever did in my life. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you don't deserve to be happy. Not your father, not anyone. You are extraordinary, my sweet girl. Never forget that. I'd read those words 1,000 times. On difficult days, I'd read them until I could repeat them from memory, until they became protection against everything my family had thrown at me. Mom died when I was 4. Dad married Victoria 8 months later. I'd spent 12 years trying to earn his love, trying to prove that I belonged in the new family he'd created without me. But sitting there on my bedroom floor with my mother's letter in my hands, I finally understood something. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It was that they'd never wanted me there in the first place. At the bottom of the box, underneath the bracelet, I found a photograph I'd never noticed before. Mom was standing beside another woman. They were both young and smiling. On the back, Catherine and Eleanor. Hartwell Industries grand opening 1999. Eleanor, EV. I wasn't supposed to enter my father's study. That had been the rule for as long as I could remember. The study was Dad's sanctuary, his private space, the one room in the house where I was specifically forbidden to enter. But Dad was at the Monarch celebrating a deal worth $12 million, and I was alone in a house that had never felt like home. The door wasn't even locked. His desk was perfectly arranged, leather blotter, crystal paperweight, a photograph of Victoria and the kids that definitely didn't include me. But sitting in the center, as if it had been left there for me to find, was a manila envelope from Morrison & Associates, attorneys at law. I didn't recognize the firm. Our family lawyer had always been Harold Finch, a kind old man who sent me birthday cards every year until he suddenly stopped coming around in 2014. I opened the envelope. The document inside made my hands go numb. Voluntary termination of parental rights. My name was already written in. The parent's signature line was blank, but a date had been written in pencil at the top. October 15th, 2024. 3 months earlier, my father had been preparing to give up his rights to me. He had hired a new lawyer, prepared the paperwork, set a date, and never told me anything. I turned to the second page and found a handwritten note clipped to the corner. Victoria's handwriting was small and precise. Make sure she doesn't find out until after the gala. We need the optics. The optics? They were waiting until after that night's celebration to discard me because they didn't want anything damaging their carefully managed public image. I returned the documents exactly to where I'd found them. Then I walked out of the study and closed the door behind me, my heart pounding as I tried to process what I discovered. I went back to the study. I couldn't stop myself. The manila envelope sat on the desk, and I needed to understand exactly how far this had gone. This time, I examined everything more carefully. Behind the termination paperwork, I found a printed email chain. The header showed it had been sent on October 2nd, 2024, from my father's personal account to someone at Morrison & Associates. Eleanor Vance has been asking questions about the original will. We need to finalize Sierra's guardianship transfer before her 16th birthday. The inheritance clause expires 30 days after she turns 16 if no legal guardian claims it. I read those words 3 times, trying to convince myself they meant something different from what they clearly said. There was an original will. There was an inheritance clause. There was someone named Eleanor who had been asking questions about it, and my father was racing against time to make sure I never discovered what I was supposed to inherit. I calculated it in my head. Today was January 16th. If the clause expired 30 days after my birthday, that meant I had until February 15th to understand what was happening. 1 month, 30 days to uncover whatever my father had been hiding for the past 12 years. The email never mentioned Harold Finch. Dad had hired new attorneys specifically to deal with this. Lawyers who didn't know our family's history and wouldn't ask uncomfortable questions. But someone named Eleanor Vance had been asking questions. The same Eleanor from the photograph with my mother. The same EV who had texted me at midnight. The same person who was coming to my door at 7 tonight. I looked at the clock on my father's desk. 4:32 p.m. 2.5 hours until I learned what I had been missing my entire life. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror at 6:45. The girl looking back at me had red-rimmed eyes, tangled hair, and the exhaustion that comes from crying for hours. She looked defeated. She looked exactly like someone who had been told her entire life that she didn't matter. I considered my options. I could do nothing. I could let my father finish the paperwork. Let them send me away to wherever unwanted children go. Let the inheritance, whatever it was, disappear without ever knowing what I'd lost. I could spend the rest of my life being invisible, being the family's secret, being the freak they had always called me. Or I could open the door at 7. I could meet this Eleanor Vance, whoever she was. I could learn what my mother had been involved in, what my grandfather's will actually said, and what my father was so determined to hide. I could fight for something, even if I didn't yet know exactly what I was fighting for. My mother's letter was still in my pocket. I pulled it out and read the final line again. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you don't deserve to be happy. I looked at the photograph of Mom and Eleanor from 1999. You didn't raise me to be a ghost. I whispered to her picture. You didn't raise me to disappear. I washed my face, I brushed my hair, I put on the nicest dress I owned, a simple navy blue one that I'd bought with my own babysitting money, because no one in this family had ever taken me shopping. At 6:58, I heard a car enter the driveway. Not my father's Mercedes, not Victoria's Range Rover, but a black sedan with Massachusetts plates. The doorbell rang at exactly 7. The woman standing on my doorstep was not what I expected. She was 58 years old, maybe with silver hair pulled back in an elegant twist and sharp blue eyes that reminded me of winter mornings. She wore a charcoal-colored cashmere coat and carried herself like someone who had spent decades entering rooms and commanding attention. But when she saw me, her composure cracked for a moment, just enough for me to notice something raw and painful cross her face. Sierra Holloway. Her voice was steady, but I could hear a slight tremor beneath it. Who are you? My name is Eleanor Vance. She paused, studying my face as if searching for something or someone. I was your mother's best friend, and as of 4 this afternoon, I am your legal guardian. She held out a thick brown envelope filled with documents. I took it with numb fingers and pulled out the first page. Voluntary termination of parental rights. But this copy wasn't blank. My father's signature stretched across the bottom, notarized and dated October 15th, 2024. He signed it, I heard myself say. He actually signed it 3 months ago. Eleanor's jaw tightened. He signed you away without telling you, without giving you a choice, without even having the decency to say goodbye. And he did it because he was afraid of you. Afraid of me? I almost laughed. I'm 16, I'm nobody. You're not nobody, Sierra. Eleanor moved closer, and I saw tears forming in the corners of her eyes. You're the sole heir to 51% of Hartwell Industries. Your grandfather made sure of that before he died. And your father has spent the last 12 years making sure you never found out. The envelope suddenly felt much heavier in my hands. I think, Eleanor said quietly, we need to talk. We sat in the living room, a room I'd never been allowed to use when the family was home. Eleanor placed a second envelope on the coffee table between us. This one was older. The paper was yellow around the edges. The seal was cracked, but it still carried the impression of a law firm stamp. Your grandfather was Thomas Hartwell, she began. He founded Hartwell Industries in 1999, but he didn't do it alone. I was his partner. We built that company together from nothing into what it is today, a medical components manufacturer worth $180 million. I knew the company, of course. Everyone in Boston knew Hartwell Industries. I just hadn't known that my family's connection to it went deeper than my father's CEO title. When Thomas wrote his will in December of 1999, he included a very specific clause. Eleanor pulled a document from the envelope, thick legal-sized paper covered in dense paragraphs. Section 7.3. It states that 51% of the company's shares shall be transferred to his sole legitimate granddaughter upon her 16th birthday, provided her legal guardian at that time confirms the transfer in writing. His sole legitimate granddaughter. I stared at her. That's me. That's you. Thomas knew what kind of man your father was becoming. He wanted to make sure you were protected, that you had power Richard couldn't take away. Eleanor's voice became firm. But Thomas died in 2013, the same year your mother passed. Richard buried the will. He fired Harold Finch, the family attorney who had witnessed it. He removed me from the board of directors, and he spent the next 12 years acting as though this document didn't exist. But you found it. Harold kept the original. A small, determined smile crossed her face, and I've spent 5 years building a case to get it back to you. Eleanor checked her watch. We don't have much time. Time for what? Tonight, your father is hosting the 25th anniversary gala for Hartwell Industries at the Monarch Hotel. 300 guests, investors, partners, and journalists from the Boston Business Journal. He's planning to announce a $12 million contract with Meridian Medical at 9. She leaned forward, and at 9:15, we're going to walk in and show everyone exactly who the real owner of that company is. My stomach dropped. You want me to crash my father's party? I want you to claim what is rightfully yours. There's a difference. Eleanor's eyes remained steady and unwavering. Sierra, if you don't act within 30 days of your 16th birthday, the inheritance clause expires. Your father knows that. It's why he's worked so hard to keep you isolated, to make you feel worthless, and to convince you that you don't deserve anything. He's been running out the clock. I thought about the note on the refrigerator. Stay out of sight, freak. What if it doesn't work? I asked. What if we go there and he simply denies everything? He can't deny a notarized will that's on file with the Suffolk County Probate Court. He can't deny the signature of a witness who is still alive and willing to testify. And he can't deny the guardianship papers that give me the legal authority to confirm your inheritance. Eleanor stood and walked toward the window, looking out at the winter darkness. Your father built his empire by silencing the people who could expose him. Tonight, we take away his silence. She turned back toward me and held out a garment bag I hadn't noticed she was carrying. Your mother picked this out years ago. She always hoped you'd wear it on a night that mattered. I opened the bag. Inside was a navy blue gown, elegant and simple, the same shade as my mother's eyes in every photograph. I changed into the dress in my bedroom. The fabric moved over my skin like water. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the girl who had been crying alone in the kitchen that morning. I saw someone different. Someone who looked like she belonged in a ballroom filled with powerful people. Someone who looked like she had every right to be there. I picked up my phone and looked at my father's contact. 0 messages, 0 missed calls. He hadn't thought about me once that day. I pressed the call button anyway. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. His recorded voice sounded smooth and professional. "You've reached Richard Hartwell. Leave a message." "Dad," I said quietly. "It's Sierra. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for showing me exactly who you are. I spent 16 years trying to earn your love, trying to be good enough, trying to prove that I deserve to be part of this family. But I understand now. I was never the problem. You were." I paused and let the words settle. "See you tonight." I ended the call and placed the phone inside my clutch. Eleanor was waiting in the hallway, her car keys in hand. "Ready?" "Almost." I walked to my bedroom one last time and took the photograph of my mother and Eleanor from 1999. I placed it in my purse beside my mother's letter. On the way to the car, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized it now. Miss Holloway. The voice was older, gravelly, but warm. "This is Harold Finch. I've been waiting 12 years for this call. The original will is in my possession, notarized and verified. I'll meet you at the gala." "Mr. Finch," I said, "there's something else you should know. My mother wasn't just Richard's wife. She was a founding shareholder, and her shares transferred to me the day she died." The silence on the other end lasted 3 full seconds. Then he finally said, "Then we have even more to discuss. I'll see you at 9. The drive to the Monarch took 23 minutes. Eleanor kept her eyes on the road, but her voice filled the silence between us, explaining the story of a woman I'd only known through photographs and old letters. "Your mother was the first accountant Hartwell Industries ever hired. She started in 1999, right out of college. Thomas adored her. He said she had the sharpest mind he'd ever seen and the kindest heart to match. When Richard started working at the company, Catherine was the one who trained him. She trained my father. She did. And somewhere along the way, he convinced her to marry him." Eleanor's grip tightened around the steering wheel. I tried to warn her. I saw who Richard really was. Ambitious, calculating, and willing to do whatever it took to get ahead. But Catherine believed in second chances. She believed people could change. The city lights passed quickly outside the window. "What happened?" In 2012, Catherine discovered that Richard had been embezzling from the company. $2.3 million had been funneled into offshore accounts. She was going to report him to the board. Eleanor's voice became quieter. Then she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She died before she could expose him. I felt something cold settle in my chest. He got away with it for 12 years. Eleanor looked at me, but before she died, Catherine gave me something. A USB drive containing all the evidence, bank records, transfer documents, everything. I couldn't locate it for years. I thought it was gone. Where was it? Hidden inside a jewelry box in your mother's closet. A sad smile crossed her face. The closet your father cleaned out and donated to charity 6 months after she died. I only recovered the USB last year after tracking down the woman who bought the box at an estate sale. The Monarch's bright facade came into view on the horizon. "Tonight isn't about the embezzlement," Eleanor said. "That's a fight for another day. Tonight is about your inheritance, one battle at a time." Harold Finch was waiting for us in the hotel lobby. He was 67 years old, with silver hair and a worn leather briefcase that looked as though it had survived decades of legal battles. When he saw me, his eyes softened with something that might have been grief. "You look just like her," he said quietly. "Catherine, you have her eyes." "Mr. Finch?" I shook his hand, surprised by the strength of his grip. "Thank you for coming." "I've been waiting 12 years for this moment, Miss Holloway. 12 years of watching your father destroy what Thomas built, knowing I had the evidence to stop him, but no legal standing to use it." He opened his briefcase and removed a document, thick and official, carrying the seal of the Suffolk County Probate Court. "This is the original last will and testament of Thomas Hartwell, dated December 15th, 1999. I witnessed his signature. I filed it with the court, and I kept a copy when your father tried to have it destroyed. I accepted the document carefully, as if it might fall apart in my hands. The paper was yellowed but intact, and the signatures were clear and readable. Section 7.3 was marked with faded yellow highlighter. 51% of Hartwell Industries shares shall be transferred to the sole legitimate granddaughter of Thomas Hartwell upon her 16th birthday, provided her legal guardian at that time confirms the transfer in writing. Richard fired me in 2014, Finch continued. He told everyone I'd retired. But the truth was that I refused to destroy this document. I refused to help him steal from his own daughter. He straightened his tie. Tonight I testify, and tonight the truth finally comes out. Through the lobby windows, I could see the grand ballroom doors. Light and music spilled out whenever someone entered or left. My father was somewhere inside celebrating his empire. He had no idea it was about to fall apart. I stood at the entrance to the grand ballroom, looking through the glass doors at a world I'd never been invited to join. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, spreading prismatic light across 300 guests dressed in evening wear. Waiters in white jackets moved around with champagne flutes and silver trays of hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played classical music in the corner, their sound barely heard above the conversations and laughter. A huge banner stretched across the back wall. Hartwell Industries, 25 years of excellence. And at the center of everything was my father. Richard Hartwell stood near the main stage, shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit. I assumed he was the Meridian medical representative. Victoria stood beside him, radiant in a red gown that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Brendan worked the room as if he'd been born for it, wearing confident smiles and offering firm handshakes. Meredith posed for photographs with investors, her freshly manicured nails shining beneath the lights. They looked perfect. They looked happy. They looked like a family that had deliberately left me behind. "This is his stage," Eleanor said quietly, standing beside me. He spent 6 months planning this night. Every detail, every guest, every moment was designed to establish his legacy as the face of Hartwell Industries. And we're about to take it away from him. No. Eleanor placed a hand on my shoulder. We're about to return it to the person it always belonged to. There's a difference. I watched my father laugh at something the Meridian representative said. He looked confident and certain that his secrets were safe. The clock on the wall showed 8:55. "It's time," Finch said, adjusting his briefcase. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and pushed open the ballroom doors. The ballroom slowly fell silent. It began near the entrance, where the first guests noticed me. A teenage girl in a navy gown, accompanied by an elegant older woman and a man carrying a lawyer's briefcase. Conversations faltered and stopped. Heads turned. Whispers moved through the crowd until they reached the stage. Meredith noticed me first. Her champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, then turned furious. She put down her drink and moved through the crowd toward me, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "What the hell are you doing here?" She grabbed my arm, her nails pressing into my skin. "Dad said you were supposed to stay home." I didn't react. Dad says a lot of things. Most of them are lies. "You need to leave now." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Before you embarrass everyone." "I'm not here to embarrass anyone, Meredith." I calmly removed her hand from my arm. "I'm here to tell the truth." "The truth?" She laughed, but there was fear beneath it. "What truth?" "You're nobody. You're nothing. You're just the majority shareholder of this company." I said it quietly, but the words carried through the room. Nearby guests stopped pretending they weren't listening. "Or I will be in about 15 minutes. Meredith's face turned pale. Behind her, I saw Brendan moving through the crowd, his expression changing from confusion to alarm. He reached us just as Meredith began to stammer a response. "Security." Brendan's voice cut through the murmur. "We have an intruder." 2 men in dark suits started approaching from the edge of the room, but Eleanor stepped forward, and something about her presence made them stop. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she said calmly. "Not unless you want to be named in the lawsuit." Brendan grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave bruises. "I don't know what game you're playing," he hissed, trying to pull me toward the exit. "But it ends now. You're embarrassing the entire family. Let go of me. You're nothing but a charity case." His voice became loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Dad kept you around for tax purposes. You think anyone here cares about you? You think you matter?" I remained where I was. "Brendan, do you know why Dad signed away his parental rights 3 months ago?" He hesitated for a moment, but I noticed it. What are you talking about? He didn't tell you, I tilted my head. He signed papers giving up custody of me in October, officially notarized. He's been planning to get rid of me for months. That's none of your business. That's a family matter. I'm not family anymore. Remember, he made sure of that. I pulled my wrist free. But here's the thing, Brendan. He didn't do it because I'm a freak. He did it because he was afraid I'd discover our grandfather's will. The color drained from Brendan's face. Around us, guests stopped pretending to focus on their own conversations. Phones appeared in people's hands. Someone was clearly recording. There is no will, Brendan said, but his voice cracked on the final word. There is one dated December 1999, filed with the Suffolk County Probate Court, and it says that 51% of this company belongs to me. Brendan opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came out. For the first time in my life, my brother had no words. And across the ballroom, I saw my father finally notice the commotion. His smile disappeared, and his champagne glass lowered. Our eyes met. He knew. My father crossed the ballroom in 12 seconds. I counted. It gave me something to concentrate on besides the pounding of my heart. He moved through the crowd like a shark through water, guests automatically stepping aside, conversations stopping in his path. By the time he reached us, his expression had become carefully neutral. But I could see the anger beneath it. Sierra, his voice was controlled and pleasant, the same voice he used with investors and journalists. What a surprise. I didn't realize you were coming tonight. Happy birthday to me, Dad. Or did you forget? A muscle tightened in his jaw. This isn't the time or place for family discussions. We'll talk about this at home. Home? I let the word remain in the air. You mean the house you signed me out of 3 months ago? The guests closest to us became very still. I don't know what Eleanor has been telling you, my father said, giving the woman beside me a hostile look, but she's been trying to destroy this company for years. She's manipulating you. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice carrying across the growing group of onlookers. Richard, I don't need to destroy anything. You've done that yourself. Every time you lied, every time you hid documents, every time you treated your own daughter as though she didn't exist. This is slander. I'll have you arrested for what? Telling the truth. Eleanor's smile was sharp. For bringing the original will that you tried to bury? My father's eyes immediately moved to Harold Finch, who had been standing quietly beside our group, briefcase in hand. The color drained from Richard Hartwell's face. Harold? The word came out strained. You're supposed to be dead. Finch raised an eyebrow. Sorry to disappoint you, Richard. I'm very much alive, and I have 12 years of testimony to provide. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like nothing you did was ever good enough, comment yes below. I want to know I'm not alone. And if you want to see what happened when my father finally faced the will he'd hidden for 12 years, subscribe and keep watching. What happened next changed everything. Victoria appeared beside my father like a shadow in her red gown. This is absurd. Her voice cut through the murmuring crowd, sharp and dismissive. Richard, why are we entertaining this? She's clearly having some kind of episode. I'm not having an episode, Mrs. Hartwell. Of course you are, dear. Victoria gave me a pitying smile, the kind adults use toward children they believe are throwing tantrums. You've always been fragile, unstable. It's not your fault. Mental illness runs in families, and your mother was never quite right either. The words struck me hard. Don't you dare talk about my mother. Catherine was a nobody. Victoria's voice rose as she addressed the crowd. A gold digger who trapped Richard with a pregnancy. She was never meant to be part of this family, and neither are you. I felt Eleanor stiffen beside me, but I raised my hand. Let her talk. Let everyone hear exactly who Victoria Hartwell really was. My mother, I said quietly, was the founding accountant of Hartwell Industries. She helped build this company from the ground up. And in 2012, she discovered that her husband had embezzled $2.3 million from the business. The ballroom became silent. She died before she could report him, I continued. But she kept records, bank statements, transfer documents, everything. Victoria's face turned white. Across the room, the Meridian medical representative stood from his table. Mr. Hartwell, he called out, his voice breaking through the silence. What is she talking about? My father didn't eat. He couldn't answer. For the first time in 12 years, someone had finally spoken the truth aloud, and 300 witnesses had heard every word. I noticed a woman near the stage pull out her phone and begin typing. A press badge hung from her lanyard, Boston Business Journal. This was no longer just a family dispute. It was now news. Brendan snapped. Maybe it was the champagne he'd been drinking throughout the evening. Maybe it was fear finally breaking through his arrogant exterior. Or perhaps he'd simply never learned how to control himself when things didn't go his way. He grabbed the microphone from the event coordinator and walked onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed through the speakers, bringing the chaos to a halt. I apologize for this disruption. I need to address what you've just witnessed. My father reached toward him. Brendan, don't. But Brendan was already speaking. This girl, he said, pointing at me, his hands trembling with anger, is my half-sister, a mistake from my father's first marriage. She has no claim to anything in this company. She's not even part of our family anymore, the crowd murmured. My father signed away his parental rights months ago, Brendan continued, apparently believing this strengthened his argument. Legally and officially, she's nothing to us. She has no standing here. She's just a bitter, jealous child trying to ruin our celebration. Eleanor's hand settled on my shoulder. I felt her gently squeeze it. Thank you, Brendan, she said, her voice carrying across the ballroom without a microphone. You just confirmed everything we needed. Brendan's face went blank. What? You just publicly acknowledged that Richard terminated his parental rights, which means the guardianship transfer to me is valid, which means I have the legal authority to confirm Sierra's inheritance. Eleanor turned toward the crowd. Under the terms of Thomas Hartwell's original will, Harold Finch stepped forward, his briefcase already open. Near the stage, I saw the Boston Business Journal reporter writing rapidly. 2 more journalists had joined her, cameras raised. This was no longer a private family matter. It was a corporate scandal unfolding in real time, and Brendan had just given us the evidence. Harold Finch walked onto the stage with the calm confidence of a man who had waited more than a decade for this moment. The crowd moved aside for him. Security guards looked toward my father for instructions, but Richard Hartwell stood completely frozen, his face pale. Finch took the microphone from Brendan's limp hand. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice calm and controlled. My name is Harold Finch. I served as the family attorney for Thomas Hartwell, the founder of this company, from 1999 until 2014, when I was terminated by Richard Hartwell. He opened his briefcase and removed the document I'd seen earlier. This is the original last will and testament of Thomas Hartwell, dated December 15, 1999. It was notarized, witnessed, and filed with the Suffolk County Probate Court. He held it up so the crowd could see the official seals. I have verification reports from 3 independent handwriting experts confirming its authenticity. He began reading Section 7.3. 51% of Hartwell Industries shares shall be transferred to the sole legitimate granddaughter of Thomas Hartwell upon her 16th birthday, provided her legal guardian at that time confirms the transfer in writing. Finch lowered the document and looked directly at my father. Sierra Holloway turned 16 today. Eleanor Vance became her legal guardian today, following the termination of parental rights that Richard himself signed. The conditions of the will have been met. The Meridian medical representative stood again. This changes the ownership structure of the entire company. We need to pause the contract signing until this is resolved. My father finally found his voice. This is a family matter. It has nothing to do with business. With respect, Mr. Hartwell, the representative replied coldly, if your company's ownership is in dispute, it has everything to do with business. My father grabbed the microphone. This document is a forgery. His voice had lost its polished control. Desperation was now visible beneath his professional appearance. My father never wrote this. Eleanor Vance has been trying to steal this company for years. This is simply her latest scheme. Harold Finch didn't react. The will has been verified by 3 independent handwriting analysts, he said calmly. Their reports are on file with the probate court. I have copies here if anyone wishes to examine them. He removed a folder from his briefcase containing 3 separate documents, each with official letterheads and professional certifications. Furthermore, Finch continued, The original will was filed with Suffolk County in January of 2000, immediately after Thomas signed it. The filing receipt is part of the public record. Anyone can verify it. My father's expression changed. Eleanor manipulated my father when he was old and confused. Thomas signed this will when he was 52 years old, Eleanor interrupted, her voice cutting through his protest. The same age you are now, Richard. He was sharp, healthy, and completely lucid. He knew exactly what kind of man you were becoming. That's why he wrote this clause to protect his granddaughter from you. This is slander. It's documented fact. Eleanor stepped closer to the stage. And if you'd like to discuss slander, perhaps we should talk about the 12 years you spent telling everyone Harold had retired, when in reality you fired him for refusing to destroy this will. The crowd had stopped murmuring. They were watching in complete silence. 300 witnesses were seeing a family empire unravel in real time. The Meridian medical representative was already on his phone, speaking quietly and urgently. I noticed at least 6 people recording video. My father had built his reputation around control and carefully managing his public image. In just 15 minutes, that image had completely collapsed. Eleanor reached into her coat and pulled out one final document. I have one more piece of evidence for the record, she said, her voice carrying through the silent ballroom. This is a printed email sent from Richard Hartwell's personal account to Morrison and Associates on October 2nd, 2024. She held it up, and I immediately recognized it as the same email I'd found in my father's study that afternoon. I'll read the relevant portion, Eleanor continued. Eleanor Vance has been asking questions about the original will. We need to finalize Sierra's guardianship transfer before her 16th birthday. The inheritance clause expires 30 days after she turns 16, if no legal guardian claims it. She lowered the paper and looked at my father. You didn't just hide the will, Richard. You actively conspired to ensure your daughter would never learn about her inheritance. You signed away your parental rights not because you didn't want her, though that's certainly true, but because you needed her out of the family before she turned 16, before she could legally claim what belonged to her. The Boston Business Journal reporter raised her hand. Mr. Hartwell, do you have any comment on this email? My father's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No words came out. Victoria held onto his arm, her perfect composure finally breaking. Richard, say something. Deny it. But there was nothing to deny. The email was real. The will was real. The guardianship documents were real. Every lie he'd told for 12 years was unraveling in front of 300 witnesses and several journalists. Some guests were already moving toward the exits, unwilling to be connected to the scandal. Others remained where they stood, unable to look away. The Meridian medical representative ended his call and walked toward the stage. Mr. Hartwell, he said flatly, we'll be in touch. Our legal team will review the situation before any further discussions. The $12 million deal was dead. I walked toward the stage. My legs felt unsteady, but I kept going. I passed the frozen security guards, my shocked siblings, and my father, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 20 minutes. Harold Finch offered me the microphone, and I accepted it with hands that were barely shaking. 300 faces looked up at me. Investors, partners, journalists, and people who had never even known I existed until that night. My name is Sierra Holloway, I said, and my voice sounded stronger than I expected. I am the granddaughter of Thomas Hartwell and the daughter of Catherine Holloway, 2 people who helped build this company from nothing. I paused, allowing the words to settle. For 12 years, I was told I was a burden, a freak, someone who didn't belong. I was removed from family photographs. I was excluded from holidays and celebrations. And finally, 3 months ago, I was signed away like unwanted property without my knowledge, without my consent, and without even the courtesy of a goodbye. My father wouldn't look at me, but I'm not here tonight for revenge. I looked across the crowd, at the phones recording, the journalists taking notes, and the stunned faces of people who had spent years believing the carefully constructed version of events my father had presented. I'm here for the truth. And the truth is this. Hartwell Industries was never just my father's company. It was my grandfather's legacy. It was my mother's work, and now it's mine to protect. I handed the microphone back to Finch. I don't want to destroy this company, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I want to rebuild it with integrity, transparency, and respect for everyone who helped create it. For a long moment, the ballroom remained silent. Then someone near the back started clapping. Others joined. Not everyone, but enough. Enough for it to matter. My father stood completely still. The applause eventually faded, replaced by guests gathering their belongings and conversations that would keep Boston's gossip networks busy for weeks. But Richard Hartwell didn't seem to notice. He stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger or contempt. It was closer to disbelief, as though he couldn't understand how the daughter he'd spent 12 years erasing had just dismantled his carefully built empire in 15 minutes. Victoria was crying. Not graceful, controlled tears, but heavy sobs from someone whose world had suddenly collapsed. Her mascara ran down her cheeks, ruining the perfect makeup she'd spent hours applying. This can't be happening. She grabbed my father's arm and shook him. "Richard, do something. Fix this." He didn't respond. Brendan stood at the edge of the stage, his earlier confidence completely gone. He suddenly looked young and lost, like a child who had realized the adults weren't going to rescue him. "Dad?" he said, his voice cracking. "Is it true? Did you really hide the will?" The silence lasted 5 seconds. Then 10. My father still didn't answer, but his silence was enough of an answer. Meredith hadn't moved from where she'd been standing since I first entered the ballroom. She watched me now with an expression I couldn't understand. It wasn't hatred or anger, but something more complicated. Something that might have been the beginning of understanding. The gala continued to empty. Guests who had arrived expecting champagne and celebration were leaving with scandal and speculation. The 25th anniversary of Hartwell Industries would be remembered, but not for the reasons my father had intended. I watched the Meridian medical representative leave through the main doors without looking back. The $12 million deal was gone, along with the stability my father had worked so hard to maintain. We met in a private conference room on the hotel's second floor. The noise from the ballroom felt distant here, muffled and contained, like a storm seen through thick glass. Eleanor sat across from me, her composure finally showing signs of exhaustion. Harold Finch spread documents across the polished table, moving with his usual methodical precision. "The will is airtight," he said. "I filed the original with the probate court in January of 2000. Richard's lawyers can challenge it, but they won't win. The authentication is bulletproof." "What happens now?" I asked. "We file for formal recognition of the inheritance with Suffolk County. Given the evidence presented tonight and the number of witnesses, the court will likely expedite the process. I estimate 30 to 60 days for the share transfer to be finalized." Eleanor leaned forward. "Richard will almost certainly contest it. He has the resources to drag this out." "He can try." Finch closed his briefcase with a firm click. "But contesting a notarized will with 3 independent verifications and a witness who was present when it was signed would be throwing money away. His lawyers will tell him the same thing." I thought about my father standing frozen on that stage. I remembered the way his expression collapsed when he realized there was no longer any explanation left that could protect him. "I don't want to destroy the company," I said quietly. "My grandfather built it. My mother helped grow it. I just want it to be run honestly." "That is exactly what Thomas wanted." Finch's expression softened. "He wrote that clause because he knew Richard would try to take everything. He wanted you to have the power to stop him." Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You don't have to figure everything out tonight," she said. "The law will do its work. Right now, you just need to rest." Rest? I wasn't sure I remembered how. Eleanor's apartment was nothing like my father's house. It was smaller, a 2-bedroom unit in Back Bay with exposed brick walls and windows overlooking the Charles River. But it was warm in a way the Hartwell mansion had never been. Books covered every available surface. Plants filled the windowsills. The kitchen smelled like someone actually cooked there. "This was your mother's room," Eleanor said, opening a door at the end of the hallway. "When we were in college, before she married Richard, I kept it mostly the same. I always hoped she..." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. The room was simple. A twin bed with a blue quilt, a wooden desk, and a bookshelf filled with worn paperbacks. On the wall was a framed photograph of two young women laughing in front of a Christmas tree, their arms around each other. My mother and Eleanor, before everything went wrong. "You can change anything you want," Eleanor said. "Paint the walls. Get new furniture. This is your home now for as long as you want it to be." My home. I sat on the edge of the bed, running my fingers over the quilt. It smelled faintly of lavender, as if someone had continued washing it regularly, even though no one had slept there in years. "You don't have to be strong right now," Eleanor said softly. "You've been strong enough for one lifetime already. It's okay to let go." I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the tears on my cheeks. But these weren't the tears I'd cried that morning, alone in a cold kitchen with a cruel note on the refrigerator. These were different. They were the tears of someone who had finally, after 16 years, found a place where she belonged. Eleanor held me while I cried, and she didn't let go. My phone buzzed at 11:30 that night. I was lying in my mother's old bed, exhausted but unable to sleep, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. Eleanor had made me chamomile tea and toast, stayed with me until my tears stopped, and finally gone to her own room with a promise that she was just down the hall if I needed her. The message was from Meredith. I stared at her name on the screen for a long moment before opening it. "I didn't know about the will. I didn't know Dad signed you away. I thought you just didn't want to be part of the family." I read the words 3 times, trying to find the hidden motive. Meredith had never done anything without a reason. Every kindness had always seemed to come with strings attached. Another message appeared. "I'm sorry for calling you a freak. I was wrong." 2 sentences, 12 words. Nothing that could erase 12 years of cruelty. But something inside me shifted anyway. I didn't respond. Not yet. I needed time to understand what I felt, what I wanted, and whether forgiveness was even possible. Meredith's apology didn't erase the notes on the refrigerator, the whispered insults, or the years of being treated like an unwanted guest in my own home. An apology was a first step, but first steps meant nothing without the second and third and 100th steps that followed. I noticed Brendan hadn't texted. No message. No apology. No acknowledgement that anything had happened at all. Maybe that was answer enough. I placed my phone on the nightstand and pulled my mother's quilt up to my chin. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, paperwork, and difficult conversations. Tonight, I just needed to breathe. For the first time in 16 years, I fell asleep without crying. The Boston Business Journal published the story at 6 in the morning. Eleanor was already awake when I walked into the kitchen. Her laptop was open on the breakfast table, with a cup of coffee growing cold beside it. The headline was displayed across the screen. Hartwell Industries Gala ends in chaos. Hidden will surfaces. CEO's daughter claims majority stake. I sat down and read. The article was detailed. It quoted Harold Finch extensively, referenced the probate court filings, and included a damaging summary of the email I'd found in my father's study. There were photographs from the gala. My father's pale face, Victoria's mascara-streaked cheeks, the Brendan frozen at the microphone during his admission, and a photograph of me standing on that stage in my mother's navy dress, looking more confident than I'd actually felt. Hartwell Industries stock dropped 8% in pre-market trading, Eleanor said quietly. The Meridian Medical deal is officially on hold pending a corporate governance review. I scrolled through the comments. Hundreds of responses had already appeared. Some were sympathetic, some skeptical, and others were simply interested in getting more details about the scandal. What happens now? Now we wait for the legal process to work. Eleanor closed her laptop. The court will schedule a hearing within the next 2 weeks. Richard's lawyers will file motions, make noise, and try to delay things, but the evidence is overwhelming. It's only a matter of time. My phone buzzed. A message from a number I didn't recognize. "Miss Holloway, this is Jennifer Walsh from the Boston Globe. We'd like to interview you about last night's events. Please call at your earliest convenience." I showed the message to Eleanor. "There will be more of those," she said. "You don't have to talk to anyone you don't want to. But if you do decide to speak, we'll do it together. On your terms. On my terms." I was still getting used to the idea that I had terms. The Suffolk County Probate Court issued its ruling on January 31st, 2025. I sat in the courtroom beside Eleanor, wearing a simple black dress and my mother's silver bracelet. Harold Finch sat at the plaintiff's table, his briefcase open and his expression calm. Across the aisle, my father sat with his legal team. 3 attorneys in expensive suits had spent 2 weeks filing motions, objections, and requests for delays. None of them had worked. Judge Patricia Coleman read the decision in a clear, measured voice. The court finds that the last will and testament of Thomas Hartwell, dated December 15, 1999, is authentic and legally binding. The petitioner, Sierra Holloway, is confirmed as the sole legitimate granddaughter referenced in Section 7.3. The transfer of 51% of Hartwell Industries shares to the petitioner, with Eleanor Vance serving as legal guardian and fiduciary representative, until the petitioner reaches the age of majority, is hereby ordered. I heard Eleanor exhale beside me. Furthermore, the judge continued, the court notes with concern the evidence presented regarding the concealment of this will and the circumstances surrounding the termination of parental rights. These matters may warrant further investigation by appropriate authorities. My father's lead attorney requested a recess. The judge denied it. Mr. Hartwell, Judge Coleman said, looking directly at my father for the first time, you are hereby removed as CEO of Hartwell Industries, effective immediately. Pending resolution of the ownership transfer and any further investigations, the board of directors will appoint interim leadership. Richard Hartwell remained motionless in his chair. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. When we left the courthouse an hour later, reporters were waiting on the steps. Eleanor shielded me as we made our way toward the waiting car. The headlines that evening were harsh, but they were also accurate. My father called 2 days after the court ruling. I was sitting in Eleanor's living room, working on homework I'd missed during the chaos of the previous 2 weeks. My phone rang and his name appeared on the screen. It was the first time he'd tried to contact me directly since the gala. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Sierra? His voice sounded different. Smaller. I know you probably don't want to talk to me. You're right, I don't. I made mistakes. He paused, and I heard him take a breath. I was wrong to hide the will. I was wrong to sign those papers without telling you. I was wrong about a lot of things. I waited. But you're still my daughter, he continued. Blood doesn't change just because of legal documents. I want to make things right. I want us to have a relationship. For a moment, I almost believed him. Then I remembered the note on the refrigerator, the photographs without me in them, the 12 years of being invisible in my own home. You're not calling because you regret what you did, I said quietly. You're calling because you lost everything. If that will had never surfaced, you'd still be pretending I didn't exist. That's not fair. Fair? I almost laughed. You want to talk about fair? You signed away your rights to me 3 months ago. You were planning to remove me from the family as soon as the gala was over. You didn't even remember my birthday. Silence came from the other end. Making things right would have been not hiding the will in the first place, I continued. Making things right would have meant treating me like your daughter instead of a burden. You don't get to rewrite history just because you finally faced the consequences. I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but my voice had remained steady. That felt like progress. If you've ever had to set boundaries with family members who only reached out when they needed something, share your experience in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories about justice and healthy boundaries, subscribe and turn on notifications. The ending of this story is something I still think about every day. Meredith asked to meet in person 1 month after the gala. I chose a coffee shop in Cambridge. It was neutral territory, a public place, and somewhere I could leave easily if things went wrong. Eleanor offered to come with me, but I wanted to do this alone. I needed to know who Meredith really was when there was no audience to perform for. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. She looked different without the designer clothes and perfect makeup. Younger somehow. More human. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I almost didn't. I know. She stared at her coffee. I've been thinking about what to say for weeks. I had this whole speech prepared, but now that you're here, it all sounds stupid. Try anyway. She took a breath. I didn't know about the will. I swear I didn't. Mom and Dad kept it from us, Brendan and me. They told us you were difficult, that you didn't want to be part of the family, that you pushed us away. And you believed them. I was 7 when your mom died. I believed everything they told me. Her voice cracked. But that's not an excuse. I was cruel to you. I called you names. I made your life miserable because it was easier than asking questions. I watched her face, looking for an angle, manipulation, or some hidden motive. All I saw was guilt. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Meredith said. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. What they did and what I helped them do. She finally looked me in the eyes. I want to be better. I don't know how, but I want to try. Words are easy, I said. Actions are harder. I know. So show me, over time, consistently, and maybe we can build something new. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a door left slightly open. 3 months after the gala, Hartwell Industries released its first quarter earnings report. I sat in the conference room as an observer. I was 16, still in high school, but legally entitled to be there as the majority shareholder. Eleanor sat beside me, taking notes and asking questions, doing the work of actually running the company while I learned. The numbers were better than expected. Revenue is down 4% from last quarter, the interim CFO reported, but that's primarily because of the Meridian medical contract delay. We've successfully renegotiated the deal at $9 million, with signing scheduled for next week. The internal audit had also uncovered $1.8 million in misallocated funds during my father's tenure. The investigation is ongoing, but preliminary findings suggest the money was funneled into personal accounts disguised as consulting fees. My father was facing a civil lawsuit from the company's board. Criminal charges are possible, but none have been filed yet. After the meeting, Eleanor walked me through the financial statements line by line. I was taking a business fundamentals course online, trying to understand the company I'd inherited. It was overwhelming, but Eleanor was patient. You don't have to become CEO tomorrow, she reminded me. Or ever, if you don't want to. You just need to understand enough to make good decisions about who runs things in your name. What about after I turn 18? Then you'll have full control. But by then, you'll have 2 years of experience watching how the company operates. You'll be ready. I looked at the Hartwell Industries logo on the conference room wall, the same logo I'd seen on my father's business cards throughout my life. It meant something different now. It represented responsibility, legacy, and the opportunity to build something honest on the foundation my grandfather had created. It meant I finally had a future worth fighting for. I woke up on January 16, 2026, to the smell of cinnamon rolls baking. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Morning light came through unfamiliar curtains. I lay there blinking at the ceiling, my heart racing with the old familiar dread. Birthday. Another year of being forgotten. Another note on the refrigerator. Then I remembered I wasn't in my father's house anymore. I walked down the hallway to Eleanor's kitchen, where she stood at the stove wearing a flour-covered apron and humming something soft and tuneless. The table was set for 2. Real plates, cloth napkins, and a small vase of winter flowers. Happy birthday, sweetheart. She turned and smiled. There was nothing complicated about it. No agenda. No conditions. Just love. On the table sat a cake with 17 candles and a wrapped box I hadn't noticed before. Open it, Eleanor said. Inside was my mother's silver bracelet, the one I'd kept hidden in my memory box for years. It had been cleaned and polished, and a new charm had been added. A tiny silver heart engraved with the date of my 16th birthday. The day everything changed, Eleanor said softly. The day you stopped being invisible. I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist, feeling the cool metal against my skin. Through the window, Boston was covered in fresh snow, the city shining in the winter sunlight. 1 year earlier, I had cried alone in a dark kitchen while reading a note that called me a freak. Today, I sat across from someone who had spent 5 years trying to find me, someone who had given me a home, a future, and the simple gift of being seen. I blew out the candles. I didn't need to make a wish. Everything I'd ever wanted was already here. If you're watching this and you feel the way I felt 1 year ago, invisible, unwanted, like a burden in your own home, I need you to know something. You are not the problem. They are. I spent 16 years trying to earn my father's love. I changed myself into whatever I thought would please him. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. I accepted cruelty because I believed I deserved it. But here's what I learned. Some people will never love you the way you need to be loved. Not because you're unlovable, but because they're incapable of loving anyone beyond themselves. And no amount of trying, no amount of being good enough will ever change that. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. Walking away from people who hurt you isn't giving up, it's choosing yourself. And sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to keep. I don't hate my father. Hating him would mean he still has power over me, and I'm done giving him that. Now I feel something closer to pity, for a man so consumed by greed that he threw away his own daughter rather than share what was never truly his. My relationship with Meredith is complicated. We're building something slowly and carefully, with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. Brendan still hasn't reached out. Maybe he never will. I've made peace with that. Eleanor is my family now, not because of blood or legal documents, but because she chose me. She fought for me. She showed up when no one else would. And that's what family really means. Thank you for listening to my story. If it helped you in any way, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you deserve to be loved. Not because you're perfect, but because you exist. That's enough. That's always been enough. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe to support the channel. Comment below. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? I want to hear your experience. And don't forget to check the description for more stories like this one. Stories about justice, courage, and finding where you truly belong.